All right. All right. Thank you all very much. And we definitely are so excited that you decided to join us today for the best pandemic practices and pivots for mentoring families. We have some wonderful speakers today that are going to be presenting for you. We have with us Sister Rita Mary Harwood. And also we have joining us today Maggie Westrick and Miss Geri Geasland. My name is Kim Elliott, and again, I am with the 4-7 Prison Ministries. I will be your facilitator. If you have any questions for either of our speakers, we would ask that if you could either just put your questions in the chat or hold your questions until after all of our presenters have presented, and then we will get an opportunity to address them. The format is going to be about approximately, we will have our speakers presenting, so I'd say like maybe about 10 minutes or so for each speaker. And then after that, that should leave us roughly about 20 to 30 minutes to also address any questions that we have. So with that, I will go ahead and I will turn it over to you, Sister Harwood, if that's okay.
Sure, I'd be glad. Would you like us just to introduce ourselves first and then do a presentation after? Would that be
yes.
good? Okay.
Yes,
good.
please.
Thank you.
And if everyone wouldn't mind to please, just a little reminder to mute yourself while the speakers are presenting. And I will start with muting myself now.
Well, my name is Sister Rita Mary Harwood. I'm work at the Catholic Diocese of Cleveland with our new bishop, who was just installed about 2 weeks ago, Bishop Malesic. I serve as the Secretary for Parish Life and Development, heading one of the divisions of the administration of the diocese. And that particular division works very much with the pastoral work of the church. And so I have 21 staff members, all working in a variety of ways to try to serve the needs of certainly the Catholic community here in Northeastern Ohio, but also reaching out to everyone. And it is as a part of that responsibility then that I began a ministry to the incarcerated in 1996. And so out of that grew then the L.E.A.F ministry, which I'll be speaking of in more detail as we go forward. So thank you, and it's wonderful to see all of your names and imagine the faces that are behind each name. So thanks so much.
Hard to see. Geri, I'll defer to you if you'd like to go next.
If I can get myself off mute, I can do that. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming today. My name is Geri Geasland, and I'm also, and I work with Kim Elliott very closely. And what we do at the 4-7, we have a number of prisons, about 7 prisons that we go into in and around the Cincinnati area. And we go in, well, pre-pandemic, we go in to the prisons and show one of our church services from Crossroads Church. And then we'd have small groups to discuss what we saw. And of course, prayer requests and things like that. But the main goal that we're trying to establish is to establish community with the people that are coming to those services. So not just necessarily bringing a message, but to actually get to know them, speak to them by name, help them feel seen and heard, which is something they don't experience a lot inside. And so that's a very important part of what we do is to build community. Now, I lead the family session, the family branch, and so that's a little bit different in that we are serving those who have families who have someone that they love that's on the inside. Whether it's a son or a daughter or a spouse or even a brother, it can be devastating to those families. If it's a spouse, it can be, their family's primary income is gone. You now have a single parent who's got zero resources. So all of that immediate financial impact, not to mention the emotional impact, and all the difficulties that go with that, and then trying to support the person that's on the inside and help them at the same time trying to manage everything on the outside. It's just emotionally going down.
I'm sorry, if you are just joining us, if you could please make sure to put yourself on mute during the session, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, in addition, so we have family support meetings once a month in person. During the pandemic, we've had to go online, and so we plan on continuing one online session a month and one in-person session a month going forward, so that folks, even if they're not in the Cincinnati area, they can participate. And it's just a chance to meet with other families in the same situation and share what you're dealing with, and kind of support each other as you go through that process, and just, again, establishing community so you don't feel like you're alone in that process. We have had several really amazing events to help connect the families with the folks that are inside. We've had family worship, which was mentioned this morning at some of the opening remarks, where we had some of the folks from Crossroads Church come in and have a music program for the inmates, and their families were able to come in and worship with them, which is amazing. We also had a daughter-daddy dance, which for a select number of individuals, they were able to have their daughters come in and spend the day. And they got to dress up in a little shirt and tie, and the daughters had t-shirts and tiaras and tutus, and just, it was just a wonderful program. We had a little lunch, and they were able to spend really quality time with their daughters, a little bit of dance party at the end, and it was just an amazing chance for their daughters to see their dads as a father instead of going to visit inside in that very difficult environment. So it was pretty amazing. The other thing that we have done for 2 years now, we have had a Christmas party inside the prison for 3 different prisons over the course of 1 weekend. 2 parties per prison. It's really a lot, but we had hot chocolate, we had a meal that was served to them, they didn't have to stand in line, we had cookies for the kids to decorate, we had activities for them to do. Actually, one of the highlights for me was we were able to bring games and books inside the prison, and they were, the inmates were able to then wrap that, choose the present they wanted for their child within the appropriate age group, wrap that present, and then actually give that child a present at the end. So it really felt like the present was from the father or the mother to the child, and it was just amazing. The families had an amazing time. It really felt like a party. It didn't feel like they were inside, and I just think that lives were really touched in those moments, and that we really made those children smile for a short amount of time, and they just loved being with their parents in that time where they could really relax and just be together as a family. So those events were amazing, and very happy to be able to be a part of that. A little bit different this year with the pandemic, but we're going to try to figure out some way to give Christmas to those families. So talking about giving Christmas in a box, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. We're trying to figure that out, but even though we can't do everything that we want to do, we're going to figure something out. One other thing that we have done in pre-pandemic time is we had Hope Summits, where we would have speakers come in and talk about issues that would impact the families. And it could range anything from forgiveness, setting boundaries, to the Ohio Justice Project, just any kind of topics that we thought would be helpful for families. And so we've set those up. Then we have small group this time afterwards, and the opportunity for somebody to pray with those families. And those have also been very amazing. We haven't been able to do it this year. it just doesn't translate very well to a virtual environment, but really have high hopes for when we can get back together again and do that one more time. So that's all we've been doing, which is a lot, but really happy to be part of this and open to any questions that you guys have.
Well,
Did I
all I
miss
can say is I keep seeing all these people and I hear all the bells of everybody joining, and truly and honestly, like, praise the Lord for all of you out there doing the work. Geri, you guys are really hitting the ground, and even though we're in this pandemic and it's crazy, like, praise the Lord for everybody that's sitting here and has a heart to help. So that's amazing. But my name is Maggie Westrick. I'm from the Ridge Project. I am located in Northwest Ohio. We do have people in Northeast Ohio as well, and we're starting to cover the nation. So that's really exciting to watch programs grow and blossom. I work specifically with youth, so I'm in our youth department, and I get the privilege of sometimes going into incarcerated units for youth, but I also get the privilege of going into school systems where sometimes we don't know the kids sitting there, how they've been affected. If they have parents in prison, if they have a brother in prison, we don't know how they've been affected. And so being able to build connections and really be with kids and allow them the safety to open up is super important to us, so that they can feel like, hey, these people might understand, or they have a base of knowing. So I think that's really exciting. So currently serving youth, and we are serving youth virtually, which, oh my goodness, I know all of you out there are like, no way, right? None of us want to be serving youth virtually because it is so hard to build those connections, the same as it is to build connections virtually with anybody. The key that we found, I'm just going to kind of jump into why you guys are here, right? You want to know how to build these connections, and I'm going to tell you, it's being intentional and being relevant. We have had to download Snapchat on our phones and Instagram and even the dreaded TikTok. Like, we're trying to meet these kids where they are because that's what's important to them. And so when you translate that to family, where are these families? How do we meet them? How do we find these families and still build an intentional connection with them without it feeling superficial or like, okay, I just need to get my numbers, I need to get my job done, and checking off our list. I don't feel that any of us ever make personal connections face to face where it feels like we're checking off a list. So that's just as key when it comes to virtual, when we're making some of my favorite sessions I have with kids is when I just say, you know what, I have a paid Zoom account. I'm going to open this up. You guys want to meet with your friends? Like, hey, let's have all the seniors out of your school come meet, get on this Zoom session. You can talk about homework. We're not going to program. We're not going to, we're just going to meet them where they're at with what they need, because what we all understand is that this pandemic has affected everybody, not just a certain group, but it has affected everybody. And some people are handling it different than others. Some people are affected differently than others. So it's kind of an anomaly that we're dealing with this one pandemic, this one thing, and how it affects everybody so differently. And so I like to say that, like, we're all in a boat, but we're in different storms. And so we're in different storms in this season with this pandemic. So being able to make connections and know, like, you know what, that family, that youth may not have internet. How am I going to help them? How am I going to make that connection so they know I care? Is there a resource out there? Can I start looking for how to get them internet, how to get something in their hands, right? So that they can start making that connection. Most youth have cell phones now that they can make connections with, but not all of them. And the same goes for families, especially if you're dealing with incarcerated families where, your main income earner is incarcerated. You've sacrificed and given up a lot, and cell phones may be on that list. So being aware and being able to step outside of our box. We've all built our own little safety bubble. I think that's important. I put a bubble around my kids a lot, but we've all built that. But being able to, like, step outside my bubble and go, okay, what would I want? How can I help? Where can I appreciate something? And so I think that's really, really important. And if you are mentors, I think it's really important that you don't burn out, that you don't schedule yourself on so many Zoom meetings. I have a facilitator right now. The only way we can meet kids is through Zoom and through virtual, right? And every time he finishes a class, he's like, oh, I hate Zoom. I get it, me too. But those kids need us. Those families need you. And so we're gonna hate Zoom, but we're gonna find more interactive ways to deal with it. So if that's creating polls, if that's letting the kids lead the meeting, or letting your families lead the meetings, or finding other ways to get things accomplished. If it's standing up, if it's sitting down, if it's changing your location, whatever it may be, just do it because they're worth it. But it's also important to take care of yourself. So I think it's really important as somebody who's on a lot of Zoom meetings to do some self-care, because you want to take care of yourself the way you would take care of the families and the youth that you're mentoring. So I will then hand it over to Sister Rita Harwood, and I think she probably has a lot more to say than I do.
Thank you so much, Geri and Maggie. Really, I've appreciated so much all that you've said, and thank you to all of you who have joined us for this session. I did say that I had started the prison ministry for the Diocese of Cleveland in 1996, 97, and we worked really hard as a group of people coming from families who had a loved one incarcerated, persons who were formerly incarcerated, police officers, judges, corrections officers, just a group of people that got together and said, if we were to create this ministry, what would we hope it would be for the people whose lives are really very much impacted by incarceration? I remember hearing one time, when a loved one goes to prison, the whole family goes. And I really believe that that is really very, very true. And it's not a situation that any one of us would wish for anyone else. And so I think our ministry really came out of that desire to be a source of support and comfort and encouragement for those who are incarcerated, first of all, and then for their families, for those who really love them and care for them and who in a way are incarcerated themselves. And so we started in 1997 and began really looking into what are the needs of people who are incarcerated. We began by trying to build relationships with the administrators of the various jails and prisons. That's really important. We're trying to find to form a partnership that we might work together on behalf of those we were trying to serve. As a result, then, once we developed we're into long plans, we began to implement that plan. And as a result, right now, we have about 400 volunteers, all volunteers, going into the jails and prisons located in the 8 counties in Northeast Ohio. It's been a wonderful ministry. But in developing that outline, we also had a line or a section that talked about families. And I must admit that although we worked really hard on those who were incarcerated in jails and prisons, we didn't start a ministry to the families until 2013. And it was the result of a phone call that I received from a woman named Elizabeth, who called me because her husband had been was incarcerated just recently, 13-year term, and she had 3 little boys. And she called me and she said, could you help me to find a father for my boys? I thought, well, that's an unusual request to be making of me. What did you have in mind? And she said, well, I grew up, I'm an only child. I never played baseball. I never went fishing. And my little boys need to have that experience. Could you help me find somebody who could be a dad to them? I said, sure. But it was the beginning then of my really reflecting on the fact that we had not started that family ministry. So in 2013, we began and we established L.E.A.F. It's an acronym, stands for Listening, Encouraging, and Assisting Families of the Incarcerated. Very simple. The ministry is very simple. It's a ministry or a gathering of people supporting one another. So that was our mission, to really be a source of support and encouragement, of assistance to families whose loved ones were incarcerated. We started in 2014, and today we have 8 groups located in different areas of the 8 counties of the diocese. Those groups are open to everyone, to anyone who has a loved one incarcerated. We put the information out in bulletins and on the website, and really by word of mouth, to be very honest. That's the best way. And started our first group in Bainbridge, Ohio. That was the first group that gathered, and the first evening we had 23 people there. It was a wonderful gathering, and our meetings kind of go this way. We start with informal, have some refreshments out. Food is great for everybody. So people just kind of gather, some more quiet, some kind of off by themselves, but we try to create a welcoming, warm environment. Then we finally gather together, and we begin with a very simple prayer. The Serenity Prayer is a favorite of so many of the people. So we pray together and have a little short period of quiet, and then we begin conversation with one another as a group. I remember, and I tell the story often with the permission of the gentleman whose experience it was. I was sitting in the first meeting next to a man whose name was John. And about 3 minutes into the meeting, he began to cry. And as time went on, he was sobbing. So I thought, oh, well, what can I do to help him? So I reached over and took a hold of his hand. I thought maybe if I hold his hand, that would help him. I continued to hold his hand for the next hour and 45 minutes. And John continued to cry. At the end of the meeting, he said to me, "Sister, I'm so sorry I cried." I said, "John, you have no reason to be sorry." He said, no, you don't understand. I had so much feeling built up inside of me. He said it was like somebody took a cork out of the bottle and all of the feelings were coming out. And I said to him, "Thank goodness you were able to do that. Thank goodness you were able to let those feelings come out. That's what we're here for." And so he said, "No, I promise you that next time we get together next month," he said, "I'm going to have 2 sentences to say." I said, "John, your tears said more tonight than any words could ever say." And every person sitting in this group knows that. I think that for me has been a wonderful image of what this group, what this ministry, I call it, is all about. It's about being with one another. It's about supporting one another. And the groups have grown. They've continued now. We're in the 6th year. And what I've seen happen in that time, so we have that meeting of listening, and about 5 minutes before we stop, we have a period of quiet. People are able to say, what's been the gift of this time for me? And then we conclude and plan for our meeting the following month. So the meetings occur once a month, 8 different areas of the diocese, welcoming for everybody. I put a PowerPoint on where we could put in resources for you. So if anybody's interested, this is not a hard ministry to begin. It is probably one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in the 25 years now that I've been working at the diocese. I look forward to those meetings. It's been a source of great support. I cannot begin to tell you the number of people who've said, "What would I ever have done without this group?" What we've seen over the years is that a number of the family members have been released from prison, thank God. And a number of them now have joined us. They've come for a period of time once they're released, and they're a tremendous resource for the group because they can talk about, what happens in prison. What are ways that you can support your loved ones from the experience that they have as having been prisoners? So that's been a really wonderful advantage for us. So that's kind of the ministry. If I talk about this period of time, I was just talking to someone this morning. We had a rather unfortunate thing happen. One of the members of our group, her daughter died very suddenly. She was the 2nd daughter that this woman left. She's lost now her 2 adult daughters, and her son is incarcerated. I can't begin to imagine the grief and the pain and the experience of loss in that family. So I was able to send that information out to all of our families and say, please join us in prayer during this time for this wonderful woman and her family. Pray especially for her. If you're so moved, please send her a card, a message of your concern for her, and please write to her son. And so I think for me, that's a beautiful expression of what we're all about. We're assisting, we're supporting one another. Those women and men in that group can really help in a way that I never can. I don't have somebody incarcerated, but they do. And they know the feelings, they understand. One little piece I want to add in regard to children, we do not have a children's group or a youth group, and maybe that's something we should be thinking about. We do provide childcare for anyone who's coming, but the amazing thing is that's only happened a couple of times. I think in many ways, those who come see this as a night out for themselves. It's a night when they're free in a way. And so, so that's kind of the L.E.A.F ministry. During this time, we've started with a couple of Zoom meetings. It's not the same. You can't put your arms around. You can't reach out and hold on to John, but it's a way. The other thing we're doing is sitting in a garden 6 feet apart with masks on. And that's a way also. Once the weather is getting a little cold, we have some meetings planned for October. It might be a little chilly, so have to wear a jacket, but and then I think we'll move into big spaces and make our circles. But not all the groups have chosen to come back together. Some are still waiting. They call one another, they write notes to one another, they send emails. So that's the way we're connecting right now. So thanks, Kim.
All right, thank you so much for each one of our speakers, Maggie, Geri, and Sister Harwood. It looks like in the chat feature, there's some encryption going on. So unfortunately, I'm not able to see the questions. It looks like 2 people did try to enter something in the chat, and I'm not able to see the questions. But what we can do is I am more than happy to just kind of go to gallery view myself. And if people have questions, then you can simply raise your hand. That might be a little bit easier than just unmuting at once. You can just raise your hand and let me know that you have a question, and I'll be more than happy to unmute you so that you can ask a question of any one of our wonderful speakers here. And in the meantime, I've got a couple of questions that I can just pose to the panel. And then, you know, if one of you or each of you wants to give your response to that, then that would be wonderful. Okay. So, of course, right now, connection is incredibly important with COVID-19, and mentoring families is definitely a challenge right now. What adjustments have you had to make in creating safer space for families or anyone that you have that is actually working with or mentoring families? And you can just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Well, I think I could probably speak for all 3 of us that we've all had to go virtual, right? Or, but I think sometimes it takes a little more work on our part, because now maybe we're going to reach out individually, so people feel that connection, that personableness of it. So reaching out individually, taking time, so it's not a big group anymore or in face-to-face, but it's phone calls. It's Zoom meetings, it's checking in on Facebook if they're on Facebook, sending a message, and just, again, being a little more intentional with how we're reaching people. That would be what we're doing.
I would agree. I think that's the way that we're doing it right now, and it's not the same. It really is not the same, but it is something, and I think that's important. I found the meeting in the garden really delightful. It just kind of was a spontaneous thing. We were first of all going to meet in the room, and I looked at the room and I thought, ooh, this is too small for the number of people we need not be sitting so close in a closed space. And it was a beautiful evening. So we just took the chairs outside and made a big circle, and the birds were singing and the flowers were beautiful and the surrounding was wonderful. It was a beautiful evening. I could feel the relaxation of people and the joy at just being able to be together once more. So that worked for us. For a couple of the groups are doing that.
All right. Another question would be, what has made some of your challenges, or what have been some of the challenges that you've had in mobilizing volunteers during the pandemic? I'm sure we have a lot of partner organizations on here that are facing a lot of the similar ones, but what are some of the things that have been particular challenges for you in mobilizing volunteers right now, or mentors?
I honestly think everyone has a different opinion on this pandemic, and we don't know what everybody's opinion is. And so it's finding out, hey, are you comfortable doing X, Y, Z? Are you comfortable with this? Are you comfortable with that? And respecting those boundaries. So it's an unbiased respect of where everybody's at. Because some of my volunteers, no, I'm staying home, I'm done, that's it. And then others are like, get me out there, I'll do whatever. So it's just knowing and respecting. And then also those ones that are super anxious and like, I'll go out, I'll do anything, I don't care. It's keeping them safe, right? Because I don't ever want that to come back on my head or on my organization that like, oh, you allowed them. So it's still keeping them safe. And I guess the best way to say is like keeping everybody in their box. You can do whatever you want in this box, but stay in it, right? So knowing what their box is and managing safety and the health protocols, that's key.
This is Geri again. For the 4-7, we have a lot of the work that we do going into the prisons is just not possible. It hasn't been possible since March. So we've been working very hard to try to be all connected. So even for our volunteers to get together on Zoom meetings, or some of them have actually gotten together in a parking lot on the night they normally would have gone in to just meet and be with each other and just connect. And so we also do a Facebook Live for the volunteers on one Saturday a month, where we honestly just get on Facebook and just do a praise and pray and worship time. And really it's just about staying connected. So, and it has been a challenge. It's been difficult because the hearts of our volunteers are to serve. And so it's been very difficult for us to not be able to do that.
Right.
But I think the most important thing we've been trying to do is just stay connected and stay present, and just keep on each other, because, as you said, even though we're dealing with the consequences of the thing. And so just being able to be together is helpful to how we serve our volunteers.
Right.
So.
One of the things that I've found very challenging, and I think are one of the things that's very challenging to the families, is concern for their loved ones during this time because of the pandemic. That has been very frightening for the families. It depends on the institution. A jail and a prison, two very different things. And in some situations, their communication is cut off. That's not usually the prisons, but sometimes in the jails, that's what's happening. And so the worry in the family is tremendous. But on top of that, as Geri and Maggie have indicated, we're not free to get into those institutions anymore. The volunteers and even the contract chaplains are not able to enter out of concern for safety for everybody, which I respect and I understand that. But then, I know that what I'm doing, what's happening at my end is that I'm getting calls from families. Can you find out how so-and-so is? I'm worried about him, or I'm worried about her. They're so lonely. They're depressed, and that's a concern. I have found that Mike Davis has been wonderful to us. He's in charge in the state of the recreational and religious programming, and he's been absolutely wonderful. But I also have found that the administrators, the correctional officers in the jails and prisons, deputy wardens, have been very, very helpful and very supportive. I have been so appreciative of that, and I know that it's meant very much. They will find out how somebody is doing, let the families know that. They're really making a tremendous effort to do that. And so I'm finding if we can facilitate that happening, helping them to get in touch with people who can help them, that's a good thing to be able to do.
And, you know, I even here, I would want to add something too, because I actually have an incarcerated loved one, in addition to working within this ministry. And I know that being informed is very important. And oftentimes that's one of the things, especially when we're dealing with adults. You know, juveniles, the rules are somewhat different, but when you're dealing with adults, then, you know, there are privacy issues and security issues where you just cannot get information. So just knowing your rights, knowing, you know, your loved one's rights, and knowing your rights as a family member is very important. I know one thing that I learned is that, you know, individuals can sign a medical release form. And if they've signed a medical release form, then there is some information that you can get. And especially in a time like this with COVID-19. And we actually had the experience where my son actually had COVID-19. And it was a very trying time. But just knowing that, you know, there are ways that you can get information, or you know, knowing, you know, what the rules are is always helpful. But sometimes we don't know those things until we're in the middle of it. So I would definitely say staying informed and getting informed before the middle of a crisis is always helpful. So thank you, ladies. Another question would be, what is, I'll go to this one. What are 3 key things, maybe if we could have each one of you maybe just share one, or if you've got 2, feel free to share 2 with us. What are some key things that mentors can do or volunteers can do to support resiliency at this time? Geri, you're muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
I was just going to say, to clarify the question, is that what they can do to promote resiliency of the people they're mentoring or the other volunteers?
Family resiliency, to support family resiliency.
I really think.
I really think it's all about.
Please, Geri, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
I think that, you know, I think we're gathered as people of faith. And I think that our faith gives us the ability to really help people to continue to be hopeful and to find meaning and to find connection and to realize the love of God and the presence of God in our lives is a tremendous gift. I really feel that that statement of I'm praying for you, I am with you, God loves you. I think those are all messages that for all of us give a tremendous sense of hope. And I started out by talking about the man who cried so hard. And that for me was such a manifestation of suffering, tremendous suffering. And I think that any family or any person that's incarcerated is experiencing that. And in that time, it's so important to realize you're not alone. You're not bearing that suffering. If we call it a cross or if we call it suffering, it's real, but you're not bearing that alone. And out of that, and I want to continue John's story just a little bit. John now is a leader in the group. Out of his suffering, there has come strength. And that strength makes it possible for him then to support others. And so, and those who come and are and can see that in the group, I think that's another source of resilience. I think we get that from one another.
I completely agree. And just to add to it, I think when you have connection and community, and it goes beyond just that these are people that I'm serving, right? They become your friends. They become people that you care about. And reaching out during this time period and just say, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? You know, do you need anything? Or just tell me what's going on with you is huge, right? And that's just a basic human caring. But you're very right about the level of suffering with the families, and knowing there's a sense of grief also, and a sense of loss, that things are not what they wanted for their family member. This is not what they wanted their life to be like. And so just as if you were sitting with somebody in a time of grief, it's almost the same thing, where you would sit with someone who's grieving. But even during the pandemic, it's just so difficult. And then people are isolated. They don't have the things that they would normally do. So everybody's uncertain. Everybody's schedules have changed. Their income may be impacted, and all of these things that are up in the air. So it's very stressful for everybody. And then on top of it, not the person that you love is safe, or if they're in a situation where the kid, are they even getting the medical help they need, and all those questions. So it's not really that we can do about what's going on the inside. The only thing that we can really do is just stay connected and say, just be there and say, you know, I get it. You know, talk to me. Let me know what's going on. And I think that's what God commands to do, right? To love each other as we love ourselves, to reach out and make that connection. Because, you know, all of our burdens that we carry are a whole lot heavier when we walk in that road alone. But when we can walk with somebody else, it's a much easier thing to do. So to me, that's the most important thing. Even within the ministry, with the fellow volunteers, with all of our friends and our family, is just make the effort and reach out and connect and say, how are you? How are you doing? Is everything okay? Anything I can do for you? It's just a simple act of kindness. I think we all need that.
I think I kind of like to piggyback off what Geri was saying. So many of these families they're responsible for their own, like getting to meetings, they're responsible for getting there, showing up, they're responsible for doing that. And so many, even if you listen to their stories, like it's generational, right? Like they've been let down generation after generation. And so I think it's when you can fill that gap and not let them down. So when you do what you say you're going to do, or when you follow through and follow up, that to me is worth its weight in gold. When you can see somebody go, she's going to do what she said she would do. She's dependable, she's reliable, she's trustworthy, she's truthful, she's honest, she's kind, right? All of these things. When they see that, then that connection is made, and it's unbreakable. People become my family. So I feel like once I've invested in you, that's it. You're in the circle. Doesn't matter, right? So they're in the circle. They're in the family circle. So my family is huge and diverse, and we love it. But it's that follow through, because so many times they've had somebody say, oh yeah, I can do that for you. I'll get that number for you. I'll get that connection for you. And it falls apart. It doesn't follow through. And so that follow through is really key, especially right now. If you're going to make a point to be intentional, make a point to be intentional consistently, and consistently be intentional, because they need that. We need that. I'm such an extrovert. I love when my friends or my family call to check on me, right? Because I'm the one who's always calling to check on everybody else. So when somebody calls to check on me, it makes me go, oh, wow, right? And so I don't have any family member But I could only imagine when somebody goes, they're thinking of me, they're praying for me, they're following through, they're doing what they said they would do, they're working for me, right? How that lifts a weight, and you start to share that burden. And I think that's the best we can do for people right now.
I think there's one more
Thank
thing
you.
I think there's one more thing that's important, and that's keeping a sense of humor. I think that, you know, when I notice when we get together, we begin kind of solemnly, you know, but about halfway through, or maybe not even halfway through, we're laughing. And I mean, we all know, you laugh because there are funny things, no matter how serious things are, there are very funny things that happen to us. And so to be able to share that with one another, and to be able to give people the opportunity just to laugh, I think it contributes tremendously to resilience. I remember many times people going out and saying, "Oh, I haven't laughed like that in ages," or "When I laugh with you, I feel so much better." So I think that's just another piece, and I can't tell you how to make people laugh, but we all know how to do that, and we all enjoy it when we're able to. So.
Excellent. That is so true.
Mhm. Wow, I don't see any hands raised in the chat, but I tell you, each one of our speakers has just been amazing with what you shared with us today. So I have another question that I wanted to follow up with. Maybe if each of you could answer this one. And this is kind of, I guess, an individual question as far as how have you dealt with keeping your own self in a good heart space or head space throughout this pandemic. I know I adopted something about a month or so ago that, you know, just in the work that we do and just processing it, that I call it heart work, not head work, not hard work, but heart work. So what is it that each one of you could share with us and all of those that have participated today that you do to keep yourself in a good heart space or head space in the midst of all that we've been dealing with in the last couple of months and work that's already challenging that you have?
So I have 3 boys. My oldest is 15, and then 13, and then 9. So I'm in a house full of boys during a quarantine, right? That's boy house. So I started buying house plants, and I come up with crazy names for them. We name them, and that's been my thing, house plants. I love them. I've only killed one, but I think for me, that's my self-care, is that I can just go water the plants, tear off the dead leaves, and my kids enjoy it too. And it's just a whole family thing that we do now.
Good.
That's fine. For me, actually, during probably the early months, May, June, I actually was really struggling with this because I do live by myself, and you know, I wasn't going anywhere or getting outside, or you know, feel like you're being sneaky if you go run to the convenience store or something. You know, it just was very heavy for a little while, and I just kind of got to a difficult place, and I found myself not reaching out. And for my own self-care, or my own sanity, I really had to start reaching out and talking to people and saying, "Hey, I need help here," which was not something I'm particularly good at. But you know, I definitely have people that care about me, and there were people that were happy to step into that space. I just let them know that I needed it, right? So that was part of it. And then once I started coming out of that, then I could start doing that for other people as well and reaching out. But I had to take care of myself first, right? So, and admit to myself that you need a little help here, right? This is not where you need to be. So, which can be difficult, especially for those of us that our mindset is to serve. Sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves. And so, yep, that's something that I'm learning and I'm trying to get better at. And actually something good that's coming out of the pandemic, we try to count those blessings where we find them, right, is that I am intentionally doing things to learn more about how to take care of myself. And that God, He didn't tell us to love other people instead of ourselves. He told us to love other people as we love ourselves. So, and that's been something that I'm continuing to learn how to do that correctly. And so, you know, for me, it was recognizing I need help and asking for it.
I think that for me, a couple things have, I too was in a really bad space for a while. At the beginning, I was confused. I felt lonely, despite the fact I live in community with a religious community of sisters. So I'm not alone, but I felt alone. And the Pope Francis talked a number of months ago. It was at the end of March. He had a prayer called the Urbi et Orbi for the city and the world. And it was at St. Peter's. And I remember seeing him walk, it was live streamed through St. Peter's Square all by himself. It was shocking to see that. I've been at St. Peter's Square many times. I've never seen it, that it's not packed. And he talked about the gospel. One of you mentioned about being in a boat. And he talked about Jesus and the apostles in the boat, and Jesus was sleeping. And there was a terrible storm, and it was really dangerous, and they were afraid they were going to drown. And Jesus kept on sleeping. And finally, he woke up. I don't know why they didn't wake him up, but they didn't. But he woke up. And he calmed the storm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid?" Well, I've read that gospel hundreds of times in my life. Those words really struck me. That is where I was. I was afraid. And why am I afraid? You know, I'm afraid because I'm feeling alone, and I'm not alone. And so that was really helpful to me. It was at that point I decided I needed to do something. And so I began walking. I went out to walk, and I noticed things I have never seen before. I watched ants. They're fascinating. I don't know if you've ever watched ants, but it's an interesting thing to do. I watched the monarch butterflies. We have milkweeds in our area, and the caterpillars, you know, the eggs and the caterpillars, and then the cocoons, and it's beautiful. I learned also that you can't grow cucumbers and watermelons in the same garden because the bees are confused and they don't pollinate them correctly. So you'll get very crooked cucumbers if you put them in. Now, that's ridiculous, isn't it? But it's a handy thing to know. Don't put them both in the same garden. It came out of this just paying attention to what's happening in nature and allowing that to be very refreshing and renewing. So that's helped me. And I won't plant cucumbers and watermelons ever in the same garden. Although I don't plant gardens. So.
I didn't know that. That's
It's wonderful. And it's wonderful to end on laughter as well. So I just want to thank you to all of our panelists, Sister Harwood, Maggie Westrick, Geri Geasland. Thank you so much for all that you're doing in your communities, for the families, for the children. We just appreciate you all so much, and thank you for being here. We want to be mindful and get everyone to their next session on time if you're signed up for a 1:30 session. So thank you so much. Please remember that these sessions have been recorded. And also we will make a note of any questions that I may have to go to the Hoover app to find your questions, but we will make sure if we see them there that we answer them, and we appreciate you for joining today. Thank you to our panelists, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon.
Mm-hmm. And thank you, Kim. Really did a great job. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.